Okay, so today I have a track that sounds like this. And by now in the series, you should know that I had the help of my buddy Kyle Turco to make this track. And it is our attempt to recreate the sound and track of Taste by Sabrina Carpenter. So in this video, I'm going to show you my workflow and my overall process for how I would go about recreating the drum part and the drum sounds and tones from Taste by Sabrina Carpenter. Most importantly, I'm going to give you this kind of secrets to how I went about recreating the very incredible, perfect snare drum tone from this song. Now, I thought that this song would be great to dive into today because one, it kind of treads on some territory we haven't covered in this series yet. All of the drum sounds we've done so far with the 1965 and Billie Eilish, those drum sounds were just kind of normal drum sounds. You got to capture them well, and there's a couple things to watch out for, but they kind of just still sound like normal drums. But for this one, it treads into that territory where a lot of pop music does, where at the end of the day, it is a real drummer playing real drums, but there's a lot of other production and mixing and effects going on to make these, especially the snare drum sound, to make that snare drum sound like it does. So, we're going to have to use some tricks in the computer to kind of get these drums to sound right. And trigger warning, there might even be samples involved. 2, this song was produced by some heavy hitter producers. It was produced by John Ryan, Ian Kirkpatrick, and Julian Bonetta, and it was also mixed by Serban, who's won like 20 Grammys. So this mix and the production is clean and really worth studying, like how they, with such kind of minimal stuff, make this song sound so huge and impactful. And 3, the drums on this song were recorded by none other than Aaron Sterling. And if you somehow do not know who Aaron Sterling is, he's an incredible drummer who plays on a ton of pop music. And I actually have had him on my podcast on episode 66. We also put out a transcription ebook together. So I'll put a link in the description for the podcast so that you can go listen to that and hear my conversation with Aaron Sterling. So I have my drums here in front of me. And these drums sound really good. It's a dead drum vibe that I've been doing for a lot of clients recently. I posted about that on Instagram and I got a lot of questions about it. So if you want to see a video on dead drums, let me know. But we're going to see if it's good for this song. So I'm going to treat this song as if it was a track that a client sent me and they said, hey, play drums to this song and we really want the drums to sound like Taste by Sabrina Carpenter. And by the way, the play along track and my finished result of how my drums sound and all that stuff, a stereo file for that, those are available to download for free in the description. So if you want to download this play along track and play to it yourself, you can do that. Just go download it for free in the description. So let's listen to the reference Taste by Sabrina Carpenter and see what we hear with the drums. So first of all, the drum part, it's really simple. It's kind of like the AC/DC rock beat with a 3 and every other bar. So it sounds like this. In every 4th bar, there's an open hi-hat on the end of 4th. That's not a hard rule, but a lot of, the 4th bar in the kind of this 4-bar loop, there's an open hi-hat. So very basic drum beat, but it's the sounds and the tone and how it fits in the mix that are really going to be the challenge here. So for the tones and for what drums I need, the kick drum is, it has that kind of modern pop thing where like this kick drum, it sounds really like awesome, but it's just like really, really pure low end with like a little bit of attack somewhere. So it doesn't sound like a big like kick drum recorded in a giant room. It sounds like this really, really clean low end with just a little bit of attack to like cut through on smaller speakers. So I'm going to switch out this Kent kick drum for something that's a little bigger that has a reso head so we can, get a little more like oomph and a little more low end. For hi-hats, right now I have these kind of thin, wispy hi-hats, and in the track, it sounds like whatever hi-hats are happening, they're pretty crisp, they're pretty articulate, so I'm going to need to switch out my hi-hats for something a little heavier. Now this snare drum tone, it's going to be a journey because I'm not totally sure how they did this. And again, I don't do research on these videos because I think it's really worthwhile to every now and then challenge yourself to use your musical intuition, use the skills that you have to try and figure it out. Because in a real world session, things like that, you're not going to have time to, spend 2 months researching and digging around on forums to see what people used. You're going to need to just go, okay, that's the sound you want. Okay, I've experimented around and I think this is how we're going to do it. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm not doing any research. I'm just going to see if I can figure it out. And for this snare drum sound, the temptation, because this snare drum sounds so awesome and it sounds so huge and explosive. And I think the temptation is, oh, well, let me go get a big drum that's in your face and, just kind of, whatever. And I don't think that's the right move. I mean, this gushy snare drum is definitely not the right call. But, I don't want to just go get a big, deep drum, even though this, sound is so huge and impactful, because what I actually think is going on, this snare drum sound kind of reminds me of, there was this VHS tape that Jeff Porcaro did called Star Licks, and I've only ever seen clips of it on YouTube, but the drums in it, he's just in a studio sitting down in the maybe 80s or 90s, and there's not a whole lot of production going on, but the drums sound awesome, and the snare drum kind of reminds me of this sound here. It's not quite like the 80s gated reverb thing, but it's definitely like reverb and room mics and all of that stuff. And in that video, Jeff Porcaro is playing what looks to be like kind of a shallow piccolo drum, and it sounds like it's cranked. So you would think like, oh, this is a big drum sound. I need to go get a big, deep drum. But I think I'm actually going to do the opposite. I'm going to get a shallow drum that's tuned pretty high up, that's pretty dry. And what that's going to do is when I lay into that, it's going to really open up and crack through in the room, and it's going to activate the room mics, because I think the whole thing of this snare sound is it's roomy. It probably has some reverb on it, but it's activating room mics, and it's really making the room mics like it's the snare drum is singing in the room mics. And in order to do that, you kind of have to have a drum that's tuned higher up. Low tuned drums just don't quite like bark and explode in a room like something that's tuned higher up. So I'm going to get kind of a shallow drum to, activate those room mics and really lay into it with a cracking kind of dry, tuned up snare drum. And for percussion, there's not a ton going on actually. Usually in pop tunes, there's like 50 layers of little percussion trinkets. But in this, I really was only hearing like some kind of like shaker or cabasa eighth notes that are kind of like, maybe that's actually just hi-hat, but maybe not. It sounds like the hi-hat is panned middle, and it sounds like there's some like shakery type things, panned to the left or right. And then there's also these hand claps. So I went through, and I already did that. I don't want you to watch me play eighth note shakers and find hand clap samples on my hard drive. So here are the shaker and stuff that I ended up with. So with the track and the hand claps and the shaker, we have this so far. So we're in pretty good shape with that stuff, but we need to figure out the snare drum thing. So let me swap out some drums. Okay, so we swapped out drums. I didn't even put a rack tom up. I'm not going to use one, so I'm not going to have it just sitting there ringing. There's barely floor tom in the track, but I put a floor tom up. It's just kind of a normal floor tom, but the kick drum I switched out. It's a 24 1970s Rogers Big R. I like it. It's big. It has a nice low end. I think it's going to be what we need. And then for the snare drum, this is kind of the crackinest, driest, thinnest piccolo-esque snare drum I have. This is a Ludwig student drum from the 70s. It's got the original head on it. It costs like $80 on eBay. And we're going to see if this works for our snare drum sound. The close mics aren't even really going to matter. So this drum, when you solo the snare mics, it doesn't sound the best. But I just need something that cracks, that's really going to like get the room mics singing and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to do there. And then I switched out for my 1970s 15-inch Zildjian A hi-hats. They're amazing. So I'm going to record this song now, and we'll see how it goes. that's kind of the drum part. It's really that complicated. And I think when we hop over to the computer and I show you kind of how I process stuff, I think you'll hear how important these room mics are. I have a mono room mic that's like 10 feet away from the drums. And then I have a stereo pair of room mics that are in the closet around the corner. And those are going to be vital to this. But we're already kind of in a good spot. This is just how my drums sound when I record them, what you just heard. And, we're pretty close. This snare drum is kind of attacking the room, activating the mics that are out there. This kind of snare drum sound, it's important to remember that it's not about what the close mics sound like. That's only part of it. That's for like the low end impact. But this type of snare sound is the math equation that happens when you add the close mics with the overheads, with room mics, and some reverb probably. And all of that is going to add up to the snare sound. So it's really tempting when you hear a snare sound like this to go like, what drum did they use? Let me just go get that drum. But that's not really going to get you the result that you want, because it's really about more than just the specific drum or how they tune the drum. It's about how they tune the drum, how they hit the drum, and how they mic'd the room and, the drum itself to, add up to all of these little things. Like you get, the low end impact from the close mics, and then you get the silky top end from the room mics, and you get the aggression from the mono room mic and whatever. It's about how all of that stuff adds up. It's not just about like, I want to go get that, I want to get that tone, so let me just go find the drum that they used and it'll sound like that. So top it up the computer and hear the final result and see what I did to kind of get us there. Okay, so I'm behind the computer and now we're going to go through kind of what I discovered and what I had to do in the computer to get us to the final product. So let's hear just the drums. Cool. I'm super pleased with that. And here are the drums with the percussion. And really satisfying. So big main event is definitely going to be the snare drum. But before I get to that, this is all that's in the track. It's like a couple of guitars. We got bass, and then a bunch of guitar layers, and then like an electric piano. It's not rocket science there. Kyle did a great job. I'll just solo up some of these mics so you can hear them. So kick in. And I did have to gate all the snare, top, and kick mics. And it actually wasn't for the bleed. It was to control kind of like the boominess of stuff. So that's kick in, kick out. Cool. Let me mute these real quick. Drum, verb, and snare sample. We'll get to those, I promise. Snare top. And then the small diaphragm condenser that I also have on snare top. Cool. Snare bottom. Here's the low floor tom. That only happens once. And I did go through and strip out all the other silence and stuff. Hi-hat mic. Cool. Overheads. And then we have this mic called Cooper. It is a mono room mic that is right there on my shelf back here. It's about like 10 feet in front of the drums. So here it is. It's also got a gate on it. So here it is without the gate. Very cool. And then the room mics. So these are two room mics that are in the closet. So they're around the corner, stereo pair of condensers that are in the closet. So here it is without the gate. And I used a gate on both the mono room mic and the stereo room mic because I felt like this drum sound, it was really all about, the room sound that you were getting, that explosion wasn't really happening with the kick drum. So if you leave those mics totally open and do as much, because I wanted to get a lot of length out of the room mics and stuff like that. So you have to compress them. And when you do that, if you don't gate them, you end up kind of blurring your kick drum and you get this kind of, sometimes that's cool. Sometimes you want all that room mic action from for the kick drum in the room mics. But for this, I really didn't, because the kick drum is super just nice, poofy, beautiful low end that has a little bit of attack that cuts through, but for the most part, it's just this really clean, beautiful low end. So I didn't want to have like all of the snare top mics and stuff like that, and then the mono and stereo room mics kind of like adding character to the kick drum mic that would just kind of essentially blur it up. So, the room mics have a little bit of action going on here, but most of it is just kind of compression and saturation. The real magic happened when I gated the room mics, because that gives you that kind of explosive thing. So this is the drums soloed up with the room mics. Here it is without the room mics. You're getting that gated reverb thing, but we don't have any reverb yet. We don't have any samples. That's just the room mics, but gating the room mics so that they're only opening for the snare drum. And okay, we're getting there. We're getting to that explosive, like drums in a room thing. But then I sent everything to a reverb, and the reverb, I even sent the room mics to the reverb. So here's the drums with the reverb. There's no reverb. And the reverb, it's a super short decay. It's less than a second. It's got 33 milliseconds of pre-delay. So it's not like a swimmy reverb. It's not boom, ka, ka, ka. I really just want the room mics and the reverb to basically be in time with the song. Do cat, 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 cat. Like it's adding explosion attack, but it's out by like the eighth note or the next quarter note in the sequence. So that's the reverb. And then I did use a snare sample, but the snare sample is really just, it's this sample I have that is a chamber. Sounds like that. And it's really low in the blend. And really all it was is to get some clean, crisp, sizzly top end that was really diffused. I didn't want to get it from the close mics because that's a very like snappy, and I didn't want snappy high end. I wanted like diffused, like shimmery high end that doesn't have like, that isn't coming from close mics. So the sample in the blend will sound like this. So that's with the sample. And that's without. So it's really just adding some like barky stuff and then like sizzly top end. And I felt like that was like kind of necessary. And I even took out some top end because that sample has a lot of top end. And that was the mix. So right before we hear the final result, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you have questions and stuff like that, put them in the comments below. And if this whole process seems a little overwhelming, it can be. Recording drums is kind of hard. It takes a lot of gear. You have to have a room for it. There's a lot to it. So if you're a producer or an artist and you want drums and you don't want to deal with having to figure all this stuff out yourself, you should just hire me to play on your songs. I've recorded with producers and artists all over the world. In 2022, I was nominated for a Latin Grammy. I record drums almost every day from my home studio. So I would love to record on your project. You can go to my website, check out what I've done, find out a little bit more about my studio. And then you can, if you want, you can book me and I'll play on your songs. And if you're a drummer and you just want to improve your skills, or you're a producer, you want to improve your skills at recording drums, I have a course for that. It's called Drum Recording for the Working Musician. And it's a great course. It walks you through how to go from having no gear, just an iPhone, and get a good recording with just an iPhone, all the way up through one mic, a couple of mics, and then, all of the mics you see here. So if you're interested in learning more about recording, Drum Recording for the Working Musician is a great course. I'm really proud of it, and I think it'll really help. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's hear the final result of what we ended up with trying to go for Taste by Sabrina Carpenter with, for me, like probably one of the coolest snare sounds I've ever achieved.